Okay. Hello, everyone. I have a very another very special guest here joining with me tonight. And just so everyone knows, because people have been asking me about Christy, we are going to have a second part to her interview. I know that we had some technical difficulties in the first part, but we are scheduling to do her later this week. I think it's going to be on the 25th, I believe, of this week. So we will be doing that. But today I have with me Jason, and I haven't had permission to use his last name, so I'm just going to use his first name. And if he wants to use his last name, he can. But Jason is in the Arkansas area, and we've been friends for a while now. We've only actually talked once on the phone, but it was a very I would say lengthy conversation, and a lot of good came from it. And we've been Twitter friends for a while. But I wanted to bring Jason on because, again, even though, yes, my channel's focused on exposing the satanic pedophiles in DC and Hollywood and a lot of the stuff that's going on, also, just like with what Christy pointed out, it's going on in everyday America. And so I wanted to bring Jason on. So Jason, I'd just like you to maybe just start off with telling us your background, your story, what happened when you were, as a young boy and growing up into your teen years and beyond, and then we'll go from there.
Well, as a child, my parents, they got together and they split up whenever I was about 15 months old. And my father been working in the oil field. He was working 18 to 20-hour days. And so he never really had time to be around and stuff. And, my mom utilized my grandma as a babysitter for quite some time, And by the time I became 3 years old, I was put into a lady's home who she adopted a couple of kids, and she opened her house up to being a babysitter. The only thing is I was the only one that was being babysat by her, and she everything started off good. I was 3 years old whenever I went into her home and she started babysitting me about 3 years old, and everything was going good. I liked it. I was a big fan of He-Man toys, and so she had a whole bunch. Her kids were kind of grown; they were teenagers, and so they had a bunch of He-Man stuff. And so that was exciting. I thought it was going to be fun, and I was a little nervous, stepping away from my family. I'd been only around my mom and only around, my grandma and stuff. My grandma was a Native American woman, full blood Shoshone. And, she was always doing art and sculpting and, teaching me kind of the Native American ways and stuff. And so I did kind of miss that. There was a lot of learning going on there. But eventually, I would say probably about a month into being I start to get nervous whenever I start to talk about it because just all floods back in. But so whenever I remember the first time that I was asked to go down to the basement, the mom said, "Why don't you guys take him down to the basement and go play with him downstairs?" And they said, okay. So they took me down there, and initially it was kind of just like, hey, you want to play? And oh, sure, and they made it sound fun. They made everything kind of sound like it was going to be fun and whatnot, and next thing I know, they were stripping their clothes off, and it was two brothers, but they weren't related by blood. They were both adopted, and so they started stripping their clothes off, and then one thing led to another. They were trying to get me to strip my clothes off, and at 3 years old, I really didn't understand what was going on, and they, of course, they were laughing and making it a joke, and so and next thing it just became touching, and then after a while, within a couple of weeks, I remember it's just like they just started really getting aggressive with me. And I remember thinking to myself, the first time that they, kind of forced themselves upon me and started to sodomize me was whenever I started thinking to myself, this is not fun no more. the pain was outweighing the fun. And that's whenever I started to really pick up on that something was really wrong. And so this went on for 2 years. It went on until I was 5 years old. I remember fighting back with it after a few months of this. I started to fight back. I started to say, no, I'm not gonna do it. And that's whenever they started threatening, we'll kill you if you don't do this. And I remember one time I was down there, and they were sodomizing me, and the door opened upstairs, and it was a creepy basement, and the door opened, and I was kind of screaming, and the mom opened up the door and said, "You guys be easy with him." And I remember thinking to myself, I wanted to yell up to that lady and say, "Please help me, help me, just come down and help me." But something told me not to say something. Something just inside of me said, "Just be quiet, just don't say nothing." And I eventually I found out why. Okay, so as time goes on, I remember this just it was the same routine over and over and over again. It's just the same, come downstairs. The mom would, as soon as as soon as they would get out of school, the mom would be like, "Okay, you guys are in charge of him. I'm gonna go run errands." And so I was left there with just them two. And so it got more and more violent. And I remember they would start to bring baseball bats into play, where they would hold me down with baseball bats, to where I couldn't move because I was starting to fight back, and they knew that I was getting a little tougher every time. And so it became real aggressive. And and about this time they started to use objects, and sodomizing me with objects, which started to have some pretty adverse effects, and I started to become physically ill. I remember, I wanted to tell my mom that, I was having issues. I'm trying to find the words to say to keep it, to keep it somewhat clean. But, I was starting to have issues where I was bleeding a lot, and I couldn't control a lot of that stuff, and I'd go home, and that, that fear of them telling me, very vividly what they would do to my mom, what they would do to my brother. My brother didn't go, he was too young. She didn't want to watch that young of a kid. And anyways, I remember this is, going on a few years. My mom was a kind of a hippie lady, and she had my hair real long. If you watch my Survivor Story video, I show pictures of how my hair was really long. Well, the mother would dress me in girls' clothes. Okay. She would put me in like these. I remember the dress that she had one dress that she put me in, and it was a white, kind of a fluffy, multi-layered dress, and it had red bows, red ribbons around the waist. And I remember one night I had to stay the night with her. My mom was going to go do something with some friends, and my mom couldn't find anybody, and last minute she called these people and said, would it be possible if you stayed the night? Oh, absolutely. And I remember the two kids were staying at their friend's house. And so I was really relieved whenever I was going over there. I wasn't scared. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to be just me and her husband. Well, anyway, so they dressed me up in this dress. And I remember I was young enough where I was standing on the bathroom counter, so three and a half, 4 years old. I was standing on the counter. I was watching her comb my hair. She put a little bit of like rouge, like red stuff on my cheeks, and then she put my hair in pigtails. And she curled my hair, put red bows in it. And then I remember the thing that I remember the most, and what I think that really stuck in my mind and how I remember it the most, is because when she put the shoes on me, they were these sparkly red slipper type shoes, like red ruby slippers, like you'd see in the Wizard of Oz. And the location where I come from, Elkhart, Kansas, about 60 miles away is Liberal, Kansas, is where the Wizard of Oz was supposedly to take place. And it's all the Wizard of Oz out there. So anyways, we get dressed up. She gets dressed up, and it was bowling night. And, she took me out to the bowling alley, and I can remember sitting on the bench, and I was forced to, I couldn't say nothing. I couldn't run around, go play video games or nothing. I just had to sit there behind her and her husband and their team. And I remember people asking like, "Oh, who's that?" And then she would make excuses like I was her cousin's daughter, and I was just in town for a night, Anyways, I remember sitting there for however long it was. Gosh, it just seemed like forever, and I hated being in this dress. I couldn't stand it. It was annoying me. And I just remember flicking my feet back and forth as I sat on this bench, bowling alley, smooth bench. And the lights from the bowling alley would sparkle in my shoes. And so I just focused on that the whole time, just the sparkly of the shoes. And then bowling got over, and she grabbed my hand, and we went up to return the shoes. And the next thing I know, she says something to somebody, and I turn around and look up, and it just so happened to be my grandpa and grandma from my dad's side. Now, they didn't recognize me. I remember my grandpa's face like vividly, like it was yesterday. My grandpa looked down at me, and he just smiled, like, "Oh, hey, cute little kid," And I remember at that moment, I wanted to say, "Grandpa, help me, please help me." And as soon as she noticed who it was, she grabbed my hand, and out the door we went. We rushed out of there so quick. I remember it was like I was being drugged by her. And I remember I just wanted to say, "Grandpa, help me. I'm in a bad position. This is not, something's right. Please take me with you. I want to go with you." But I noticed that he didn't recognize who I was, because I was dressed up in you just wouldn't expect to see your grandson dressed in girls' clothes at that point, Anyways, that was about the moment whenever I went into the darkest part of my life. I mean, I just, I remember thinking that I would never, nobody would ever save me from this, And so over the years, it just continued more violent. And I remember as time went on, the kids after school activities, they got more into sports. And so they weren't there whenever I was there a lot. And so things did kind of die down for a minute. But during the summertime, it's picked up. And of course, I'm going to go back to the bowling night. That night, I remember I slept in between her and her husband, and they proceeded to have sex on top of me. Like, I could remember they didn't touch me or anything. They weren't like engaging. I had my clothes on and everything. And they wouldn't touch me or anything, but I remember feeling an erect penis against me. And then I remember feeling like the hand just sliding across me and my privates and everything like that, and hurt, and then they just like smothered me there. He was on top, and he was a big guy. He was bigger than you are, and I'm not talking about your weight or anything. I'm just giving a comparison. So he was a very big guy, and she was a really small person. And I remember he was on top of me with his back on me, and I could just remember like, I can just, all right, that's fine. All right, go ahead. Sorry. Anyways, I can just remember, yeah, please stay in there and shut the door. Okay, bud? Thank you. Anyways, so I remember like the hair on his back is the only part, the most disgusting, I could just, in the sweat and everything like that. And I remember thinking I was going to suffocate. Like because I couldn't breathe. I was smashed into the bed, and I just couldn't breathe. And I remember thinking I was literally going to die right there, and no faster than it started, it ended, and they rolled apart, and I was just left there with, this horrible thing. And that is whenever the night terrors began. That's whenever I started sleepwalking. I would run from my bed I would always find myself, for whatever reason, and I don't know if maybe any of your listeners might know anything about this, but for some reason I would end up at the refrigerator with a gallon of milk. And I think that what I've taught myself is that maybe it was the closest thing that I could find to reality to try to wake myself up, just but I would always be standing there, and my mom would always find me, and I'd be just dead asleep, sleepwalking, standing in front of the refrigerator with a gallon of milk in my hand. Sometimes it would spill all over me or on the floor, and it became a real big problem, enough to where my mom was like trying to lock up the refrigerator at night. Well, the night terrors just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and we're talking like where, this is before I'm 5. So, because whenever I'm 5 is whenever I put a stop to it. But so I started, I couldn't sleep. I was starting to have really bad attitude. My mom was starting to pick up on something wrong, and I remember that just the night terrors really were freaky, and what it was multiple, probably about, it just seemed like 100 people all in one room, and they were all just raping me. And just, I would watch as my flesh would be ripped from my body, and then I'd just be laying there as bones, and they were just like eating me, whatever, and just like laughing and just taunting and poking, like whenever they poke at me, their finger would just go straight through my skin, and then they'd bring it out and it'd be covered in blood, and they'd make me, eat. I hate saying all this stuff because it's so grotesque, and I don't like your viewers having to hear this kind of stuff, but this is the life that I've had to live. I mean, I've got tons, and that's too hard to see, but I've got so much writings, and this is how I've come to recognize everything, because I wrote down every instant that ever happened. After it happened, I'd go and I'd write it down. I would write details down, and that's how I have it stuck in my head. And I've got probably about 200 journals just full of stuff. But going back to that, the night terrors, they that's whenever I started getting into pornography, because I was trying to find a way to desensitize myself. And I would get into, trying to figure out a way to not be so scared to go to sleep, and nothing worked.
This was before you were 5?
This is before I was 5. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I remember finding a Playboy in my dad's drawer, and I remember thinking, okay. And I just seen, and he also had some more hardcore pornography magazines and stuff like that. And I started thinking, oh, well, I don't know what was driving me, because there was something that was kind of communicating with me to help me, even though I didn't know nothing about it. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. My grandma was Native American. She believed in Christ. She really did. But she would never teach me she would talk about Christ in her own way, but she would never push Christ on me or anything like that. And I think the main thing was that she wanted me to find out for myself, so let me get that. And, she was, my mom was a hippie. She partied a lot, she didn't really come to Christ until later in her life, so I just didn't grow up in a home where there was any kind of Christian anything, whatever. But so I didn't really know. And I remember my cousin, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to continue back into this. So I remember after the bowling incident, I became very vigilant in myself, and I made a pact with myself that I wasn't going to allow this to happen no more. And I started making plans. And I remember that summer, the summer that I was 4, I turned 4 in February. That following summer, I was about to start kindergarten. Okay. And I remember I was playing in the backyard, and I dug a hole with my Tonka truck. Right. Well, I had a pretty good sized hole, it was about a foot deep. And the boys came home from football practice, or from baseball practice. And I remember they were in the backyard, and they're like, "Hey, you got to come inside. Mom's got to go do errands, and we're going to watch you." And I was like, "No, I'm not going inside. I'm done. I'm not going inside. I'm playing out here. This is where I'm staying." And they said, "No, you're going inside." Well, all of a sudden, they just grabbed me and they shoved my head in that hole. And one of the brothers buried my head in the sand, and then they proceeded to rape me, and I couldn't get free. I couldn't breathe. And I just remember praying, and I mean, I think God is instilled in all of us no matter what, because you hear things on TV, you see things, churches exist, my cousins were into Christ, and, so I did have family and stuff, and I knew about it. But, I just remember saying, I just want to die. Just kill me now. What's the point? If this is going to be my life, what's the point? So, and I remember just being completely buried, and when you're sucking in sand into your lungs, and you want to die right there. That's 4 years old, And so I just remember that after that, they finally pulled me out, and then they kicked me right square in the anus. And that was the most pain I've ever felt in my life, like it hurt so bad. And so the next week, my mom, the lady said, "Well, I can start watching my brother." She wanted to start watching my brother to make a little bit extra money. My mom was having a hard time. She was just going to start to take on 2 jobs. So he came over, and I remember the first day that he was there, I'm sitting on the couch, and I can remember this house like it was my own house. And I'm playing with the He-Man. I got the tiger, and I got He-Man, and I'm just like, playing. And there's a set of mirrors in front of me behind the couch, and I hear one of the kids say, "Hey, you want to come over?" I'm not going to use my brother's name. I don't have permission, but he said, "Hey, come over here. You want to drink a Pepsi?" And my brother, just being a little toddler, runs over. It's like, "Yeah, kid wants that stuff, He's like, "Well, get up on my lap." And I remember looking in the mirror, and I was like, looking around, and I was like watching, slowly playing. And then he puts his hand in his pants, and I jumped up. I left my He-Man, left my cat there, and I left it right down. And I grabbed my brother, and I grabbed him by his arm, and I ripped him off his lap, bolted out the door, and I ran 3 blocks down. My aunt lived 3 blocks down, and whenever I go over and play at her house, I had me a little hideout in her bushes in her backyard. And so I ran back there. I opened up the back gate, went straight for that hiding hole. And I remember watching him chase, but I was dragging my brother. I mean, I was dragging him. Like, he couldn't run. He couldn't keep up with me. And I drug him 3 blocks, and we get there. And so he's crying, he's bawling, and I'm so scared that they're going to find me. I'm like, "They're going to find me. They're going to find me. Shut up, dude. Just shut up. Don't cry. How can I shut this kid up?" So I take my hand and I put it over his mouth, and I just held it as tight as I could until he stopped breathing, because I didn't want them to come and kill us, man, because they said if I tried anything that they would kill us, and they would kill my brother, and I knew that they were going to kill my brother. And so he stopped breathing, and eventually he come back. But I was like, okay, so my brother's dead. I thought my brother was dead, and I was like, I'm just holding him. I'm just holding him, because what else am I going to do? I've killed my brother now. And then all of a sudden, he just starts breathing, and he opens his eyes, and he's like, he stays quiet. And I know for a fact that God was helping me right there, because there's just no way, because I didn't give him CPR. I didn't try to help him out, because I was like, I would rather him be dead than to have to go through what I went through. So, anyways, hold on 1 second. This is about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I stayed there, and I remember it got dark, and all of a sudden I seen a light come on in my aunt's house, and so I ran into my aunt's house, and she was in there, and she was like, "What are you doing?" Hold on one second. What's up? Okay, well that's fine. Just hang out in there for just a little bit. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Go ahead. Get your popsicle. But just try to stay in there, okay? All right. Sorry. Um, Let me get another drink. She doing all right? All right. Well, let's hurry up because I've only got like an hour, okay? Let her have a bite too. All right. No, I'll come and get you whenever I'm done, okay? We're almost done. But anyways, so here I am sitting there. My brother comes back, and I'm kind of relieved, but I'm kind of scared at the same time because I'm scared he's gonna start crying, and they're I know they're looking for me, and they're probably hot on my trail. They're gonna sniff me out, and they're gonna find me, and they're gonna murder me, and that's it, I'm done. Well, my aunt's light kicks on in her house, and I just leave my brother there, and I run inside, and I'm like, I'm trying to tell my aunt, but I'm so flustered. I just don't know how to get the words out. My aunt's like, "Where have you been?" She's like, "We got the whole town looking for you. We put out a missing report. They've got the police looking for you. Your mom's looking for you. What are you doing?" And I was like, "Just listen, please listen. This is what was happening. It's not my fault. It's not my fault." And she's like, "Hold on, I need to make a phone call." Well, she calls my mom's house. This is back before cell phones, so all we had was landlines. She calls my mom's house. The person that picked up was my stepdad. And my stepdad, I'm not going to get into that because my stepdad is a piece of trash, and that dude just doesn't even deserve to have any credit of anything. But he answered the phone. He said, "Okay, well, I'll come and pick him up." My mom was out looking for me everywhere. So he gets there, and my aunt's feeding me ice cream, trying to calm me down. And, she's trying to get the story out, but I'm still nervous about saying anything. And well, my stepdad shows up, and my aunt and them have a talk, and then he gets me and my brother in the truck. And then I'm sitting there, and he's yelling at me. He's like, "What the hell are you doing? You could have killed my son, And this isn't even his son. He just adopted him. And anyways, he was like, "What'd you do to my son?" Uh, he's like, "You could have killed him." And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, here comes a backhand right in my jaw, just like boom, just bloodied my face. And I mean, I'm 4.5 years old, just popped me, and so at that moment, I knew that no matter, I couldn't tell anybody ever. I wasn't going to be able to tell anybody. So my mom my mom kind of started getting a hint. She's like, "Well, what's going on?" She's like, he ran from this house for something. He did all this for something." So she quit. She stopped taking me there at that moment. And anyways, within 2 months, that family bolted. They left. The kids stayed with some friends just to finish out high school, but the two people left, and I've searched for them all my life looking for them. No social media, no nothing. They don't have any kind of there. I guess she does have a Facebook, but she does fingernails, and she's got like 5 pictures of some fingernails that she's done. And but other than that, she's not very active. And I've tried to get in contact because I just wanted to ask why. And but I feel like that's probably a bad idea because I don't really, I've spent all my life really coping with this. But then at 8 years old, I relaxed out a little bit, for the next few years. School was going great. I was making friends, because I lived in the country and didn't get I didn't have a lot of friends. Started going to school, and I started to kind of chill out and forget it a little bit. I would write still every night, and write all my dreams down. Every nightmare that I'd have, I'd write it down detailed. And at 8 years old, I just had this. I was like, my mom had just got this video, those big VCR tape camcorders. She was so proud of it, and she worked her butt off to get that thing. And I remember they left me home alone to, uh, they were going to go on a date or something. And anyways, so I just had this idea. I was like, you know what? I'll get that video camera, I'll set it up, and I'll tell my story to the video camera, and then I'll hide the tape under my bed because I know my mom always cleans out from underneath my bed, and then she'll find it. And then I didn't tell my mom. She just found the information, right? And that would kind of a catch-22, I didn't actually tell, so they can't kill me. Because I was still scared that if they found out I told, they would kill me, And anyways, it just, what had happened is I remember every day for months, I'd go home. As soon as I got off the school bus, I'd run home, lift up the bed mattress. Oh, still there. Dang it. And I mean, I just told every detail down to the look of their penis, so I could have proof of, like, I'm not lying. If you look at their penis, you're going to tell that there's something that I know what I'm talking about. Well, this is where my life takes a crazy turn, because this is what skyrocketed me into a 29-year addiction into drugs and alcohol, is because my stepdad found the tape. He watched the tape. And I remember running home, opened it up, no tape. I was so excited. I spent that whole night. I was just like, oh, this is gonna be so great. I'm gonna feel so much better. My mom's gonna know. Well, days went by, nothing happened. Weeks went by, nothing happened. Months went by, nothing happened. I started getting scared. I started freaking out. And so I remember thinking, okay, they found the tape. And my night terrors started coming back really heavy. Like I had this beast just sitting on my chest constantly, and just always having this and teasing me about my brother, about suffocating my brother. And anyways, so I remember I was just like, I was rummaging through my mom's stuff one time, and I found my stepdad's 22 long rifle. And I was 8 years old, and I was like, I just grabbed it. I ran outside, and I went sat by my favorite tree that I'd go sit behind and just talk to my dog. And the problem is I had it in my mouth, but I couldn't reach the trigger because my arms were too short. It was a long rifle, and I just couldn't make it. So I was about to put my toes on it and pull that trigger. And right as I kicked my boot off, my stepdad comes around the corner and just kicked that gun out of my mouth, and it ripped me open, And instead of asking me why you got a gun in your mouth, boy, he said, boy, you stole my gun. This cowboy, he stole my gun. So out to the back of the barn I went, pants dropped, 17 lashes to the rear end with he liked to use a strap of leather. He was a leather worker. He liked to use a strap about half an inch thick, 17 lashes to my butt, And I remember I still got scars across my rear end where it just bled. And it got to the point where I was laughing, and every time I'd laugh, he'd give me another one. But I couldn't feel no pain no more, And so I was like, okay, whatever, And then, so I'm 8 years old. The first time I tried to commit suicide, he didn't tell my mom anything either, so she didn't know. So he kept all this stuff from my mom. Well, whenever I was 9 years old, I tried to hang myself in a barn. I learned how to tie a noose, and because I'd watched another cowboy. See, I grew up riding horses and working on a cattle ranch. I was up at 4 o'clock every morning driving truck. By the time I was 8, I farmhand. So I watched a guy was tying a noose, just playing around, and I was like, oh, perfect. So I tied it. I put it up in the barn. And the beam breaks, it just cracks just enough, and whenever eventually my brother came out and seen what I was doing, and I was like, oh, played it off. I was like, oh, I was just being stupid, because I didn't want him to notice. I didn't want him to know. He didn't know until he was like 18 that that he hated me for a long time for doing, because he remembered me running with him and doing what I did to him, but he never understood why I did that because he was too young. Just let me know about time. But anyway, so here we are, and I can remember that didn't work. And so the next attempt, I was like, I don't know, 13 or 14. And I took my stepdad had one of those old school razors, that you switch out, you unscrew, and you put the double-sided razor blade in. And it was weird. I was watching my cartoons on TV, and I just got up mindlessly, walked straight to the bathroom, undid it, and just went. And then all of a sudden, my mom's pounding on the door, and she's like, "What are you doing in there?" She's like, "Something's wrong. What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing." And then my mom, she's like, "Let me in." I was like, "No." And then all of a sudden, she just kicks the door in. And I mean, I had hit the vein just right. That's why I got, it's all covered up, but I covered up my scars with tattoos. But, the blood was just squirting out because I hit the vein just right. And me and my mom, she was so livid. She grabbed a hold of me, and we just like, this is the most, my mom was, she's bawling her eyes out, and we're slipping around in my own blood. And I'm laughing at this. It's so weird. I don't know why I'm laughing. And I'm just telling my mom, just break my neck. Just kill me. You brought me in. Remember, you said you brought me in. You can take me out. And I know parents always say that stuff, it's a joke, but I really wanted her to take me out. And I didn't want to kill myself, and I wanted somebody to do it for me. Well, I stopped for a while. I stopped doing suicide for a while. My mom put me into therapy at that point because now she knew. This was the first time my mom witnessed that I had attempted suicide, and she found out about the gun instance, and she found out about trying to hang myself all through, and so I started talking, but I never told my counselors anything because I was like, they don't care. They're not going to care. But so I fed them full of lies, and just, they tried to help me. And I remember the only person who ever helped me, his name was Cliff Burton. And I was a huge Metallica fan at that time. And Cliff Burton was the bass player, and he died and in a bus wreck. And, and so I was like, Cliff Burton. Okay. So I listened to him. I was just fixated on him. And he said, "Look, you've been coming here for a month, every day for a month, and you haven't given me anything. And I know you're lying to me about something." He said, "What are you lying about? What happened to you?" And I think he had an idea, that it was probably sexual trauma. And he said, "Look, man," he said, "I'm going to tell you this. This is the only thing I'm going to tell you. And then we're not going to see each other anymore because you're wasting your mom's money. It's expensive." He's like, and I know you don't understand that because you're not the one paying for it, but your mom is paying a ton of money for you to come and see me. He said, "You can kill yourself. Matter of fact, you can go home right now tonight, go kill yourself, and you'll never be remembered for the rest of your life. You'll die right then and there. Nobody will know your name in 20 years. You won't matter to nobody." He said, "Or you can go home. You can pack away all this problems that you have. You can start a new life, and you may grow up to be somebody, and you may be famous one day, and you may have a legacy. You never know." And I said, "Okay, you know what? I made that decision. I'm not going to kill myself no more." I had one slip up, and this is whenever my stepdad, I was 16. My stepdad, we were standing out by the truck, and my stepdad come outside, and he's like, he called me outside, and he said, "Hey," he's like, "come talk to me for a little bit." And I said, "All right." So I went and talked to him, and he said, "Man," I got my ears gauged, right? And he said, he's like, "You think those will grow back?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "I doubt it. I said, "They're pretty big." He said, probably not like your butthole, and excuse my language, but that's exactly what he said. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah. He said, it's not like making a videotape talking about how you like gay sex. And I was like, and at that moment, I knew that he was the one who found the tape. And I thought my mom, I didn't know who had found the tape, but instead he mocked me at that point. And he said, and that's all he said. And he laughed. He just like, and I remember I just stopped what I was doing and I left, you know, and so I went inside and I just grabbed every pill bottle out of my mom's medicine cabinet and I just took everything. I just shoved it all into my throat. I just down and it didn't matter what it was. And by the time my mom had some sleeping pills, and by the time I passed out and my mom came in there, she made the joke. She's like, you could have grown boobs, son. She's like, because the last one was estrogen, her estrogen pills. Well, my mom had caught it just in time and they rushed me to the emergency room and pumped my stomach out and got it all pulled out and everything like that. I had a month worth of I was real sick for a month, but I came through and pulled through and after that I was on my own. I took off and I never looked back. And then my mom, I blamed my mom for not taking my side and taking my stepdad's side. So I just abandoned my mom for many years. And I moved all over the United States, never could settle down because it seemed like I would always tell my wives or whatever. And, that would, it tended to not sit well. People don't know how to deal with this kind of stuff. People don't know how to deal with these kind of stories, and the, it's just one of those things where every time I would tell somebody, they would turn on me, and it just would become, like they would just almost become disgusted with me, and this is where I started doing drugs at 10 years old. I started doing heavy drugs, cocaine, and by the time I was 13, I was real bad into meth. And then I've been pretty much clean, really truly clean for about a year now, and I'm almost 40. But, the thing is that the drugs and alcohol allowed me to be somewhat of a normal person because, I could hide away behind all those chemicals and just bury it deep inside. So, that's it's a sad state of affairs, man. And I did a podcast a while back, and my buddy, he was molested by his grandma, and he's like, what's messed up? He's like, almost everybody I talk to has been molested in some way or another. He's like, and it's almost a rite of passage to be a human being. And I was like, no, dude, no, that ain't right, man. So you can't look at it that way. I was like, this is something deeper, man. And then when my mom died, I didn't believe in God at all. I was an atheist. And my principal at 16, I dropped out, and in order to get back, he gave me Anton LaVey's Black Bible and told me, hey man, I'll let you back into school if you do an essay on this. You don't have to do any homework. You don't have to, all you got to do is show up to your classes. I'll tell your teachers you don't have any homework. I'll take care of all that. You write an essay on this book, and then at the end of the year, turn it in and I'll pass you. I'll give you all A's for your whole. And, I got into it. I read it, and I read the 11 rules, 12 rules. I think it's 11 rules. And I started slowly getting into Satanism, but there was nobody else in my town that was into Satanism. So it wasn't like I was in a cult. I was just reading the Lucifer's doctrine, and that began my life of crime. I was starting to break into houses. I was starting to, the drugs were getting really heavy. I was starting to fight really bad, like I would look for any reason to fight, and the aggression that built up from my childhood, I hurt a lot of people. I hurt some people pretty bad, and I put people in the hospital. And I mean, and, when my mom died, she was on her deathbed, and I was trying to talk her out of believing in Jesus, because I was like, look, you're spending your last days praying to something that is not real. It's just not real. Look, we got science that proves that it's not real. Science proves it, Mom. Didn't you go to school? You know, science proves it. My school told me that God's not real. And at that moment, when my mom went, I remember sitting there and she said, son, you're not going to convince me any other way. She said, I don't care what you do. She said, you'll find out. And then she grabbed me and she grabbed me by my face. She said, what are you going to do when I'm not here? Because my mom was the only person that I could call to talk me out of killing somebody. You know, when I was living in Flagstaff, there was a guy who rented a room from us, and he borrowed my friend's computer. Well, I needed the computer. There's only one laptop in the house. So I needed it. And when I walked in, I was like, I'm just going to go get it. He had his door locked. So I kicked the door open. I grabbed the laptop, and guess what was on it? He was watching child porn. And I said, dude, and I took it down. I ran that laptop down. I said, Tim, I said, look, man, just don't ever let anybody use your computer. And I went back up to that room and I grabbed him by his hair and I drug him down 2 flights of stairs. And I was a tattoo artist at that time. And I grabbed my tattoo machine gun, the gun part of it. And I mean, I slammed him on the floor and I was just about to stab him in his throat. And there was a force that stopped my hand from continuing into actually killing this guy, because my mind was made up. I was killing him, you know, and that force stopped. I just couldn't go any further. And then finally, my roommates grabbed a hold of me, pulled me off, and the guy packed up and burned out right then and there. And I told him, I said, dude, don't ever, if I see your face, you're done. You will be done. Trust me. And so I would advise you to move out of this state, you know. And, you know, I was drunk. Go ahead.
About yeah, thank you for all that you've shared and being so transparent. Yeah. Let's talk about the year ago when you finally broke out of the drugs and the alcohol, and you really sort of, because I remember when we talked on the phone, that was kind of when you felt like you really started getting real with Yah, with God, with, you know, getting faith in. So talk a little bit about that, and how did that happen? How did you finally break free?
Okay, well, that's what when my mom was dying, she grabbed me by my face and said, son, who are you going to turn to whenever I'm gone? You're not going to make it, you know? And so she went into a coma, and I sat in that chair for 2 weeks as she was dying, and I just stayed there. I didn't move. And as she died, all of a sudden I just started seeing these orbs, like this energy just escape from her body. And it just started just going. And I was like, what am I going crazy? And then all of a sudden there was this voice that just like consumed me. And it said, come home. And I don't know. I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because it was the most overwhelming feeling I've ever had. I could still taste the tinginess in my mouth, and it said, come home. It said, I've been here this whole time. It's just people don't listen. I've sent many people to try to save you, and just people just don't listen, son. I'm sorry. And so I started searching out for the truth. And at 33, I walked into a church, and I had a nightmare. I had a nightmare with my ex-wife, and there was she was freaked out. There was a cat that jumped up in my window, and it was growling, and this thing was kind of swelling in my stomach, and it was coming out my throat, and it was just this, you know. And she said that there was another sound that was sounding like it was coming from our foyer, and she said she just kept binding and praying for, you know, the blood of Christ to come over me. And that next morning I woke up, I said, we got to go to church. We've got to go to church. I've got to get into a church. I have to. And then I went to a church, and I started going to school and started learning as much as I could about Jesus. I just flooded myself. I've got like 200 books in my garage of just nothing but Jesus theologies and stuff like that, because I had to know, you know, and it was one of those things where I started really seeing the big picture. And the more that I searched, the more God revealed himself to me, and to the point where I was starting to make moves. I planted my feet one day and I said, I'm not going to take another step until you tell me to move. And I just stood there, and it was like 2 hours that I stood there. And finally I just started moving. And, you know, and then for 3 years, I was going to be an evangelical Christian. I was on the streets preaching. I was going to these heavy metal concerts that, you know, and now I'm not the metalhead in the show. I'm the metalhead outside of the show, bringing people to Christ.
Hallelujah.
I did a tour with a band called the Order of Elijah, who's no longer Christian now. So I had to quit the band, but I did a tour with them, and my goal was to bring 500 people to Christ. Whether I did that or not, I don't know, but we did have some great moments. And I know that there was people dropping to their knees, you know, and that's how I ended up in Little Rock, is because a man fell off a overpass, and some rich lady in a Jaguar just pulls up to me, of all people. It's like, please, somebody help me. She was crying and makeup running. She's like, I almost ran this guy over. Somebody needs help. I was like, why would you not take him to the hospital? She's like, I don't know why. I just drove right here. And the guy, he's in her car. And so I run over to her car, and I open up the door. I was like, sir, are you okay? He's like, please help me. He's like, I'm a Christian. He's like, pray for me. I need prayer, please. I'm something's not right. And so I dropped to my knees right there, and I just started praying for him. I was like, look, man, I said, dear Father, you know, Heavenly Father, I'm asking that you take the alcohol away from him. I'm asking that you take the drugs away from him. I'm asking that you take everything that is causing this man to fall off these overpasses away from him. I don't care about his pain. He needs to feel this pain. Maybe if he felt the pain, maybe he would understand why the drugs and alcohol are bad for him. And within 45 minutes, the guy was up walking around on his own. And like, I swear his legs were broken. He couldn't get out of that car. And that was my first actual true, like actual seeing a miracle in real life, you know? And it just hit me. And then, of course, the band, you know, they started slipping away, and they're just like, oh, Jesus is just a facade. And I'm like, they're like, hey, come on tour. We need you. You're the best tour manager. And I'm like, nah, dude, you guys can kick rocks. I'm for God. I don't care.
Amen.
I'm not going to go on tour and
Amen.
blaspheme God just because you want it. So.
Amen. It's amazing, as you've been telling your story about, and even though all the pain and all the hardship you went through, Yah was constantly protecting you, even using evil people, but keeping you from killing yourself or going a bad way. And then, of course, your mom, you know, the prayers of a mother, a righteous mother, really avail much, you know, when they're praying for her, their children. I remember, because I want to go back to I want to go back to 2 points. One, when you described your mom when she died, and then just the voice come home. I remember when I was a little kid, there was a lady at our church, and she was just, I mean, riddled with cancer, and she was in so much pain. Like, I remember my parents would describe how she would just be moaning on her deathbed for months, like just in a lot of pain. Yeah. But the day that she died, this like incredible peace just filled her room. It was just like something almost like you would never experience anywhere on earth.
Yeah.
And even though she'd been in pain and moaning, she had a really strong faith in Yahshua and the Messiah. And the night she died, her eyes just started almost glowing, like she could see something that no one else could see in the room. And the smile was on her face. And it was like the way my because my parents were actually, they were either there or they had friends that were actually in the room when she passed away. The way they described it was like, even though no one could see anything in the room, her face, the countenance on her face, it was like she was seeing the Messiah return in all the glory, like what you read about in Revelation 19. That's how her countenance changed. It almost started glowing.
Right.
So I wanted to just confirm you on that. And then the other thing is, you know, how Yah, once you started getting your life right and you really started putting your faith in the Messiah, how he put you right in that situation to pray for that guy. Because the natural man would be like, oh, we got to pray that, he hasn't broken his legs, or that, but it's like the Spirit of God told you, oh, I got to pray that God uses this to get him out of his sin, to get him out of his alcohol and stuff, and probably use you because of your background, Well, it's amazing. It's amazing because, people, and even Christians, they'll read the scriptures and they'll be like, well, okay, it says we're supposed to have signs and wonders and healings and stuff, but are we ever really going to see that? And yes, I'm here to tell everyone that what you're saying is absolutely true. I remember when I was, this was back in early 2000s, when I was like 20, 23, 24, there was a Messianic pastor, and he called me. He was really frantic. And he called me, and he said that his daughter, she was only 3 years old, had 105-degree temperature. Now, if you're only 3 years old and you have 105-degree temperature and it was going up, that's that's you got to rush to the hospital. And he was literally about to go to the hospital to get, so he was calling me frantic. I started praying over the phone. I was not even there. I just started praying over the phone. Within 2 minutes, the temperature went from about 105, 106 that where it was hovering down to 98, just in 2 minutes. So guys, God will anoint you, and he will cause you to do these things. He'll put you in these right positions if you're submitted to him, keeping his word, and you really love him. You're bananas for Jesus, like what Keith Green said. You're really making him all. So I wanted to highlight that. I wanted to ask you about a specific thing. You mentioned the whole Wizard of Oz, and also you wearing the red shoes. Are you familiar with what Fiona Barnett and David said about the MC Ultra mind control, about Wizard of Oz connected to the red shoes?
That's the whole thing. Is like I stayed away from all this stuff, the pedophilia stuff, because of my aggression, and it wasn't until Cappy came out that I actually showed up on the scene to help do whatever I could to do. Whenever I called you that one time, the reason why I called you is because I lost my way for coming out of drugs and alcohol, and doing all this stuff. I got back into drugs and alcohol, drugs and partying when I moved here, and I moved here to get away because I didn't know anybody here, and so I slowly started backsliding, and I was like, man, I can't. Something's wrong. It's like the devil's pulling me back in bad. He wants me so bad. I'm a force. If I'm on the devil's side, I'm going to be a force for the devil, and he knows it. If I'm on God's side, I'm going to be a force for God, and he knows it. And so it's this constant pull on my body, that I'm feeling. And, whenever I called you, I was desperate because I knew that I was sinking back into my old ways. And especially once Cappy came out, and I started thinking of all this stuff kept bringing back up and everything. And, I started, all those emotions started coming back in, and, I'm just scared that I'm going to.
Well, and I totally agree with you, because the scripture even says, whatsoever is good, whatsoever is holy, whatsoever is righteous, whatsoever is pure, think on these things. So absolutely, with your past, you don't want to trigger yourself. You don't want to even remind yourself of who you were, because you're a new creation, right? So you're headed forward. And so with that, I'm going to ask you, because we're sort of over time here, but I'm going to ask you a concluding question here. And that is, what do you do? I mean, other than, I know you've gotten your life right, and you're headed toward, trying to serve Jesus with everything in you. But are there some specific things that you do just to make sure that you're thinking about positive things, healing, daily overcoming the past that was upon you?
What I do is at night while I sleep, I play the Bible, and I play it in Hebrew, and I play it in Hebrew, and because what I know that even though I don't know Hebrew or anything like that, I feel more presence, power, and on top of me, and I'm just getting back into reading my Bible, but my wife and I have a lot of conversations and over things, And I will be honest, like right now, as you're talking to me, I'm not in the best place so I'm not 100% back to where I could be. And that's why I called you and contacted you. And that's why I was glad that you asked me to do this interview too, is because when two or more come together, there he is. And I feel the presence right now. I've kind of stepped away from listening to Fiona and listening to Isaac and listening to a lot of people, just because I already know all the stuff that they're talking about through my own research. And so what I've done is that I've started to just pray and just constantly pray every day. Like I don't think there's a second that goes by that Christ's name doesn't slip my lips. It's like, oh Christ, I'll do, Yah this, Yah that, Yah this. I'll drive, I sing to whatever beat is on the radio. I just repeat words that are glory. It doesn't matter what words they're singing. I'll change the words to reflect going towards God. And I'm learning to thank everything, just to say thank you about everything, no matter what it is, because I never know when even the bad stuff might come to play in the future for a good reason. And but overall, it's really been the sleeping and playing the Bible, the audio Bible in Hebrew, um, at night while I sleep, that has led me to wake up with a stronger feeling each day, and so,
Amen.
um, but
Amen.
yeah, like I say, that the red shoe thing, once I started to learn about the red shoes, and she had this dress and these red shoes in a specific box that she kept in a specific place.
Yeah.
And so I'm not too sure if, I know she knew what she was doing. And that's why I think that she was part of some kind of satanic cult myself.
Yeah,
I
I was
just
going to
didn't
say
know it.
it almost sounds like this babysitter was part of the satanic ritual abuse, even if you didn't know it. Obviously, you were only between 3 and 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I know your mom didn't find out till later, but
My
you know,
mom didn't find out until her deathbed.
right? But your mom obviously was the one who hired the babysitter. Did your
Hmm.
mom ever have any type of sense that something was off about the babysitter? That something was
Uh, no, she played it. She played it so well. The one thing that the babysitter did to me is that she used to pierce ears with a piercing gun,
yeah.
and she pierced my genitals. And so that's another thing that led me to believe that she was part of a satanic cult, but
Yeah.
not
I'm
because
sorry.
it was mutilation. They were
Yeah.
trying to hurt me and physically stuff.
Yeah, and I know what Fiona Barnett has said because of her experiences is that these Satanists, I don't even like to call them Luciferians anymore. I call them Satanists.
Right.
These Satanists, they're very good at pretending to be something to the outside
Hmm.
world when they're living just a diabolical life. So I think I actually will put SRA survivor in your title for this
Yeah.
video because honestly, I think you really are. I really
Well,
do.
and once I started finding out about through Fiona and through all the stuff like Sarah Ashcraft and all, listen to all these people's stories, I'm like, wow. I was like, I didn't really put it two and two together, but all the stuff that's happened to them really did happen to me. It's
Right.
just on a smaller scale in a small town. But I'm telling you, I got an interview with one of my old buddies, and we talk about the town. I won't go back there. I won't go back to that town because the evil that is in that town. Like, and half the time I'm worried that somebody's going to kick my door in and take me out because of the stuff that I know from that town. And so I always ask that people pray for my protection over a lot
Yeah,
of stuff.
I don't normally do this, but I'm going to go ahead and just pray on
Mhm.
as we're recording because I think it's going to be really important. So Yahshua, I plead your blood over my brother Jason. I pray for him. I pray that first of all, it says that the righteous are as bold as a lion, and the wicked spirits they peep and mutter. So, Jason's being bold. He's coming forth. Honor his boldness. And I just pray all these devils that control these people that try to, that would maybe put fear or try to bother, we just rebuke it right now in your name, Yahshua, that there's angels encamped around Jason and he's going to have no cause for fear whatsoever. Because we're living in a time right now where you're seriously doing some damage to the enemy's kingdom. And we thank you for that. I thank you for Jason. I pray that you will keep him close to you, intimate with you. Remind me to keep calling Jason and helping him because I know we had a really good phone conversation. several weeks ago that ministered to him and his wife. And I pray for him and his wife and for their whole home and their children and everything, just their whole family. I just pray that you would protect and guard and guide Jason. Thank you so much that you've brought him into the sight of you, because the only club that's worth being a part of is the blood-washed, blood-bought servants of the Most High, Yahshua of Nazareth. And that's the club we all want to be in. And you said, he that endures until the end, the same shall be saved. So help us to endure until the end, because we want to hear that. We want to hear you say, well done, my good and faithful servant. So teach us how to be good, how to be faithful, and how to be your servants. Thank you so much for this interview. We love you and appreciate you so much, Yahshua. Amen.
Amen. Hey, and I do want to say one thing too, and this is something, the question that I've always asked myself is how come God didn't intervene? You know, that was what kept me away from actually seeking God out when I was 15, 16, you know, learning about God. It's like, well, if he's so powerful, how come he didn't just step in and end this all, you know, like squash these people like a bug, you know, and save me, come in and save me. And there was only one person who's ever answered this question to me that really made sense. And she said, well, do you think that maybe God was trying to talk to the people in that area to say, hey, why don't you go check on him? Maybe you need to go check on him. But because they weren't in line with God, that they weren't hearing him, you know, like my mom wasn't really in line back then with God. So maybe God was trying to get her to go check on me. She was only 4 blocks away while this was happening, working at the grocery store, town of 2,700 people, you know. And I'm just saying, like, so if anybody thinks about that, you know, in the future, if God tells you to check on your family, check on your kids, drop what you're doing and check on your kids, because you never know what somebody's doing to them. And my daughter does not leave my side. I don't let my kid leave my side, man. And matter of fact, I was like, if I'm going to do anything that requires going to a park, I'm putting I'm going to get my own little tracking device, and just in case, you know. So,
Amen.
anyways,
I think that's a very good point. And you know, I always say this to people. I say, look, you never blame a holy God for the wicked choices of humans.
right.
Because the way God set up reality is he made us in his image. And just like he has free will, we have a limited free will that's within his sovereignty, but he does give us space to do things. Just like Satan can only do what God allows him, but he does allow Satan space to test people, to try people and stuff. So yeah, we have to understand that God's not going to he doesn't want a bunch of robots. He wants people who are going to be lovingly obedient to him. And unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of people are not lovingly obedient to him. And it's been like that for about 6,000 years, but that's going to change. Yeah. So Jason, I just, again, want to thank you so much for this interview. I'm sure we'll do this again, because you just have a lot to tell. And in fact, I even think I would love to have you on again, just to explore the bright side of you overcoming and how God's using you. I was using you, you know, to minister in your community and things like that. So I'm definitely looking forward to having you on again.
Well, I appreciate it, man.
All right.
Hey, and peace be unto you, man, and to everybody who's listening. That's just
hallelujah. Shalom, shalom. Everyone, thank you for watching. And again, I just want to make this clear, like I do with all my interviews with SRA or anyone who's been abused by pedophile. I'm very lax on my comments on every video except for these. So if there are any comments that are attacking my guest, I'm just going to warn you again, you will be immediately banned. I don't give any chances whatsoever.
Here's the one thing, like I invite people to try to poke holes in mine, because my story goes back to where the people who have actually done this to me have actually apologized. The 2 guys, their lives went so far downhill that the wife of both of them have contacted me and asked me to give them answers to what happened. And we found out through the grapevine that he had been molesting his own daughter. And so she was just blessed to have talked to me. And she, you know, so it's all documented. So nobody can poke holes in my story. You can troll me all you want, but you can't poke holes. So, but I appreciate that. And God bless to everybody.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. And everyone, you know, obviously there's a shift going on right now. We just had the Australian Prime Minister apologize to victims in Australia.
Wow.
Things are shifting because we've been praying, we've been fasting, we've been seeking God, and we're seeing things change now. God's using Trump. He's using a lot of people all over the world to bring this issue to the forefront and to get healing for these SRA survivors. And we just need to just keep praying and fasting and seeking God and doing what he's telling us to do, because I'm telling you, we're doing major damage to the enemy. It's just happening, and it's
absolutely
wonderful. It's wonderful to see this. This is an exciting time to,
right.
to be living in.
Well, all right, man. You have a good night, and I'll be seeing you. Like I say, my mom used to live in Juneau, and I've always wanted to go there.
Oh, I would love to have you anytime. It would be awesome.
I remember her telling me, and this will be the last thing I say, I promise. But when she came back, she would just come back to visit her family because she loved Alaska so much.
Oh yeah.
And her little sin got her pregnant with me, and because my dad was dating her sister, and so you can see how sin works in the, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot there, but my aunt loves me.
The amazing thing is and only God could do this, because he's like the master chess player.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow he's able to use even selfish choices, and even Satan for that matter, to accomplish his purposes eventually.
Right.
It's a beautiful, amazing thing.
Right.
But,
all right.
All glory to God. All right. Good night. God bless you.
Yeah, you too.